everybody. So I think it was mentioned that I'm a managing director at Redpoint Ventures, but I spent most of my career as a founder and exec and had the great pleasure of working alongside Solomon when he was joining Docker, or when he was building Docker. So we'll spend some time talking about that and then what the future looks like. So, for those of you who don't know, there are founders, of course, that build companies, and then there are founders that change industries. And you and the Docker team, I think, really changed the way people thought about building and deploying applications in the cloud. And you ushered in this whole shift of cloud native. Obviously, that was in a major platform shift when we were moving to cloud. Now we've got another platform shift in moving to AI. You're now building Dagger, navigating another platform shift. So tell us a little bit about how you think about that, how you think about going from building a general purpose application that can do so many different things, or a general purpose set of tools, and then kind of ride this wave as people are figuring out what infrastructure means in the age of AI.
Yeah. Well, first, I have a lot of empathy for the people who are in the middle of this tornado, starting with the people at OpenAI who just sort of opened Pandora's box, because that's the situation we were in when we opened the containers Pandora box. And I think it's hard, it feels like first world problems, but in my experience, it's very difficult to sustain that level of chaos and pressure when you're inside of it. It's happening all around you, and this time it's different because we didn't create GPT. Yeah. We're just like everyone else. I'm probably in this room. We're sort of looking at that wave and thinking, okay, how do I ride this wave exactly, and sort of rushing in. And I remember seeing that when we were doing Docker. From the other perspective, seeing a whole industry sort of rush in towards us, not really us, but this thing that we sort of discovered. And yeah, I mean, it's the most fun part of a startup when a big wave hits and everyone's rushing in, and that's when you can tell who's enjoying it and who's like really stressed out and not really built for it. But yeah, it's surfing big waves is fun,
I think you talked about Docker as being a necessity at the time to actually make cloud computing happen. Like, how do you know that Dagger is a necessity for AI infrastructure? Like, what signals are you seeing that other founders might be able to learn from as they're trying to navigate this shift that tell you that now is the time for Dagger and that this is a necessity?
Yeah. Well, we're in a situation that I think a lot of other startups are in, which is that we built something that we thought was valuable and important, and we built it before this big AI wave hit. And then we had to decide, okay, how does this apply in this new post-AI world? And I think different startups have approached this differently. There's a separate group of startups that are completely post-AI, right? The idea comes from the emergence of this AI wave, and that's a different situation with its own set of challenges. But if you're building something that predates the LLM revolution, then you have to. It's a real test, I think, because it sort of it forces you to find out what was fundamental about what you're building that was true before LLMs hit, and it's still true after, right? And ideally, LLMs amplify it, and it forces you to go through this sort of sorting exercise. So in our case, Dagger is about application delivery, like running software factories, automation, things like that, and it forced us to figure out, okay, how does this automation apply now that, in our case, the software being shipped, a lot of the times, is being developed by a mix of human developers and now AI developers, right? And it's an exercise I love because I love building from first principles, but I think it can be stressful if you were sort of focused on a very narrow point solution pre-LLM, and then LLMs come in and kind of blow everything up. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah. I think it's about sorting out the fundamentals, building from first principles versus trying to solve a very narrow and maybe too shallow problem.
Well, I think to that note, when you have a team, and again, we're speaking to a bunch of founders in the audience who have teams, and you come to your team as a founder, you're presenting this vision, you're getting everybody to buy into the vision, get excited about it, and then the market starts shifting underneath your feet a little bit, and you have to rethink, like, how does this vision translate or not? Like, what are our sacred cows, and what are we keeping an open mind about? And certainly in a lot of my portfolio companies, there have been elements of teams who are very resistant to moving into AI or talking too much about AI because it feels very hypey, and they're like, hey, I came in, I bought into this vision, and now we're changing tune.
Yeah.
So you've really navigated that twice now across Docker and across Dagger. Like, how do you, as a leader, think about navigating your team through that and keeping them like focused when you as a business are iterating towards finding, true product market fit as the market moves beneath your feet?
Yeah, it's. I mean, I can only share our experience. That I don't know how well it generalizes, but the commonality for me between my experience at Docker and then now Dagger is that there was very little external motivation. It was very internally motivated, and both in our case by the joy of building a specific kind of technology because it's cool and it feels really powerful and it feels like it's potentially super useful, but let's figure out what the applications are. So that's just our approach to technology. We build very general purpose platforms bottoms up. So it's a leap of faith as a technologist that the tech is just so cool and powerful. Surely we're going to find applications for it. Probably not the right approach in general, but that's just how we did it. And with Docker, it was like 5 years of absolutely no one caring at all. Like we were nobody. We had no network, no connection, no credibility whatsoever. We're just building our thing, and there was no pressure because no one cared. And then we got lucky, and it applied very well. And this time, I think we're doing it the same, and it's turning out to be very useful. So when LLMs started becoming huge, we didn't actually change anything. We didn't pursue it. Of course, we used it because it's fun, but we didn't. There was no emergency meeting like, oh no, we got to do the AI thing, and we started getting the question a lot, like, are you doing the AI thing? And well, as technologists, we're curious, we're intrigued, but the pressure, if we're going to do it, it's going to come from an internal motivation, and then eventually, as you know, in our case, our users, our open source community started applying our tech to building AI agents, and then they came to us and said, hey, FYI, we're doing this. And then you gotta follow your users where they take you, right? So that's how it happened for us. But I think there's a real risk of the FOMO AI pivot where you just put AI on your website, or even worse, you throw away your old product and you do a new AI product for the wrong reasons. If you do it for the right reasons, like this has no traction, this has traction, and we can differentiate, that is great. But if you got to have some reason, right?
Yeah.
I see every once in a while, especially in our space of DevOps and cloud and infrastructure, I do see companies, sometimes competitors, sometimes not, that are, I think, making that mistake. They're just kind of throwing away something that at its core is good because they don't, they feel like, they want to feel good and feel like they're inside the circle, right? It's FOMO-driven, so you got to resist that. Find a way to resist that. Yeah.
What signals do you look for from whether it's customers or a community to know that you've really hit on something, right? And it's really starting to work. And how do you separate a strong enough signal that something's real from, the FOMO hype-driven development?
Yeah. I feel like it's hard. I mean, the best way to know is to experience it, to have experienced it at least once. Not necessarily as a founder, but as a founder, as an employee, as an advisor, as a partner, as an investor. when it hits and you see it firsthand in any role, in any capacity, then you will know forever how to recognize it. When you haven't, it's hard because you can easily lie to yourself. I think this is where surrounding yourself with people who have experienced it, that you have a relationship of trust with, that trust that they know what they're talking about, and also trust that they'll be straight with you.
Yeah.
And then they'll say, nope, that's not it.
This isn't working yet.
But they said they are interested, then we should stay in touch. Yeah. Yeah, that's not what product market fit is.
We often as VCs, I think, have to be the bearer of that bad news sometimes. And of course, it's amazing to see the energy and the passion that founders have for something. And you're like, look, I've seen this before. We're not there yet. When you're there, to your point, it is a bit of a feeling, but at the same time, it's also people won't leave you alone. You are overwhelmed with interest and pull and people coming back and, asking for more and trying to put you into production in ways that you don't want them to yet. I think those are some of the signals, at least with a developer tool or infrastructure company, that that it's working. You guys ended up in a situation at Docker where you were absolutely overwhelmed by interest and adoption, and it just felt like something almost, it took that 5 years, but then it almost got away from you, right? Then you're rushing to keep up. That's what it looks like when you've really hit on something. It's not hey, so-and-so exec at a big company agreed to, take my phone call and told me that they might want to catch up again in a few months.
Definitely, and it's interesting because you reminded me of a few things. First, at Docker, which used to be called .cloud before we pivoted, our investors at the time definitely did play that role, and I want to credit Peter Fenton for being that guy back then, saying, when we had no exposure to it.
Yeah.
But also, I think I remember being being told something similar at the time, hey, you'll know when you see it. Here's an example, and I think I was given the example of Yahoo, boom, or Google, or whatever. And then your reaction to that is okay, great. If I'm Google, I'll know. Great, thank you. Any other super useful advice? So the other thing that I think is important to realize, there is a gradient. There's a curve where it's not one day you're nobody and the next day you're Google.
Yeah.
It's more there's a qualitative feeling to traction.
Yeah.
And usually it's associated with some sort of a vertical line of some sort. But it starts really small. And in the beginning, the vertical line can be the level of engagement of the people. Are they begging you the next day to have access because you forgot to give them access? Maybe it's just one person, but it starts with something at the micro scale, and then you develop the instinct to follow it, and you kind of keep following that gradient instead of the other gradients, and it kind of helps you prioritize. And I remember very distinctly with Docker, that's how it started. We had this thing that was doing okay, but not terrible, not awesome. And we were getting the useful feedback from investors that, okay, it's good, but it's not good enough. So that's useful information. So you try stuff, and then we had this very micro but super strong qualitative signal that this half-working prototype that would become Docker, it barely worked, but people wanted to talk about that more than they wanted to talk about anything else we were building. And so we just kind of followed that. But it's important to distinguish those two, because the investors that were giving me the very useful advice that this is not good enough, they were not yet seeing the potential of that little thing there, because it was too early,
nascent,
too broken, too weird, and very technical. But eventually they saw it. But they gave us the frame to kind of at least try.
Changing tacks a little bit, I know we said that we'd talk about the future of DevOps and building with AI a little bit. So let's spend a few minutes there before we run out of time. You're obviously, with Docker, you were looking to abstract complexity. With Dagger, you are too. Your kind of in the mix now with everybody really building infra at the forefront of AI. Like, how do we actually make agents real and put them into production? Like, what are you seeing as the biggest gaps today? Like, what problems need to be solved for people to really be able to build and scale agentic infrastructure?
I'm as an engineer, I'm very excited about agents because it's really a new primitive for software. It's like a new low-level primitive. So it changes how you think about software. And also, I'm excited as a software guy because it's still just software. It doesn't make all software irrelevant. Like, I think there's a storyline out there that AI is the end of software. I don't think so at all. I think it's a completely new architecture for building amazing software, but you got to put these little digital brains inside your software. So how do you do that? Basically, you got to rethink the whole architecture. So if you're anywhere in the software stack, enabling others to build software, it's a super exciting time because whatever your specialty is, now you have to figure out how to transpose it to this new architecture. And of course, it's risky, but it's very rewarding for anyone who fundamentally wants to invent new things. It's not a great time if you're fundamentally trying to milk what was already invented for maximum efficiency and profit. It's not a great time for that. But yeah, in our case, I try not to talk too much about our product, but I think that's a general idea. It doesn't matter if you're a database startup, then now agents are spinning up a gazillion databases on demand, right? If you sell compute, then of course everyone wants these GPUs, and you got to figure out, okay, do we stick to low-level GPUs, or do we go and enter the inference market? Do we sell more specialized services? So it's just sort of a reshuffling of the cards across everything. And of course, our corner of DevOps and software delivery is a huge reshuffling of the cards. Everyone has these old these old inefficient CI/CD pipelines, and like none of them are going to work with agents. You got to rebuild everything. So that's great for us.
When I reflect back, though, we still talk about this all the time. Like, a lot of DevOps pipelines today are like kind of baling wire and duct tape together still, right? Like, every aspect of software development has gotten a lot more sophisticated, except maybe that one. Like, it's gotten more complex, and we're trying to build more complex, more scalable applications. But the problem that you started out to solve with Dagger was that problem, right? Like, how do we bring real programmability to this? And it seems like, at least from what I'm seeing, when people are trying to build agents and new like agentic applications, it's kind of the same thing. Like, there is no standard tooling out there yet. And obviously Dagger's looking to solve a piece of this. A lot of other really smart, hardworking folks are trying to solve other pieces, but like, it feels like a lot of things are not still totally solved. People are still thinking through memory, for example, and like, what does long-term memory look like, and what does scalability look like? And by the way, how do I keep my agent from taking the action I told it to 3 or 4 different times? And how do you handle coordination across a fleet of agents? Like, I don't know if there's anything that when you're in there with builders who are building this stuff that you're seeing as one of the biggest problems that maybe Dagger's not solving, if you don't want to make it a Dagger pitch.
It's kind of all over the place. Everyone's a beginner. Everyone's figuring it all out. I love it because I realize now that I've started too late. And I started professionally, in the early 2000s, right? And so I haven't actually experienced the beginning of a major new tech wave. I entered kind of halfway into the internet web wave. One way, depending on how you look at it. And this is like, okay, this is really like no one knows, and nobody knows what they're doing. And it's great. So because we can help them as tool makers. In our case, I think it helps to transpose. The best way to successfully surf the AI wave, in my opinion, is to know who you serve, what your focus is, independently of AI, and help them surf the wave. In our case, we serve the platform engineers. We serve the engineers that help all the other software engineers ship product, right? And every software organization has them. And we're helping them surf the AI wave, and that's the core. That's our constant, and everything else is a variable. And once we figured that out, everything else, the roadmap becomes easy, right? Because we know who we serve. They're out there, and they're thinking, how do we help our teams ship software now that there's AI everywhere? And we don't have all the answers, but at least we have a focus, right? We have one slice of this problem to help solve. There's a million other slices that we don't worry about. Yeah.
Focus, focus, focus.
Yeah,
That's
always.
a perfect words to, I know we're at time.
Yeah.
It's the perfect way to wrap up because he's heard me say focus probably 10 dozen times in board meetings. I think it's one of the most important things that founders should take away from this is the importance of maniacal focus on solving the customer's problem. We are going to leave you to the next talk, but we are going to be on stage doing a Q&A in one of the other sessions that's coming up soon. If you have any questions about being a founder and navigating the shift to AI, we'd love to talk to you about that. So thanks everyone for attending, and we'll hopefully see you there.